Month's meeting, so this is my first in-person ASONP meeting in a long time. So it's really awesome to see everybody here in person. I thought about doing this because there are so many really cool and interesting artist opportunities out there, but a lot of times we don't know about them. And I think this is one of them. Artist residencies with national park units. And I say national park units because it's not just national parks. There are artist residencies with national memorials, national seashores, national historic sites. There are a lot of them out there. In fact, there are over 50 of them in the national park system. And then there are other other artist residency opportunities too that aren't with the National Park Service, and I'll briefly just mention a couple of those. So the title, National Park Artist Residencies and Where to Find Them. So my subtitle comes from my habit of photo editing or working on presentations, as the case was here, on my dual monitor system. And my work area is on the left monitor, and I have something playing on the right as background to entertain me while I'm working. And in this case, it was Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. So, great movie. Anyway, so I thought I would start with just an overview of what the National Parks Service artist in residence opportunities are like. Even before I get into where they are, how to apply for them, all that, kind of what is expected of them, what is of you, and what is the experience like. So there's some give and some take. You give presentations, one or two depending on the length of your residency. You donate a piece of art that was either created during or inspired during your residency. So for example, if you're a painter, you may not have actually painted your painting during your residency, but it was inspired during your residency. Or maybe you started working on a short story or a novel or some other piece that takes longer to complete than you might complete during your residency. The presentations vary, and they're really up to you. You can create exactly whatever kind of public presentation you want to create. It could be a presentation like this in an auditorium. Most of the parks visitor centers have some type of theater like this where you can do a presentation. Or it could be something outside, experiential, hands-on. It just really is up to you to craft whatever kind of presentation you want to do. Now, they provide you lodging in or near the park. Most of the parks, it's in the park, but some of them are like at staff housing that might be right outside the park entrance, but it's right there. Most of them do not provide a stipend or transportation. So you have to pay for your own food mostly, your own expenses, get your own transportation. I'll talk a little bit about some strategies on how to deal with that. But some of them do provide stipends, and I'll mention those. So the duration of the residency really varies a lot. Typically the minimum is 2 weeks, but there are some that are as many as 6 weeks. There's quite a few that are a solid 4 weeks. So it really gives you an opportunity to spend a lot of time in the park. Most parks also have more than one artist in residence in the year. So there is competition, but there's more than just one slot you're competing for. All right, the last part, free reign to create your art. You get to do, you pick your own schedule. Other than your public presentations that you'll coordinate, there will be a staff person there who coordinates with the artist in residence. Other than scheduling your presentations, everything else is your schedule. You get up, create as much as you want, as little as you want, take full advantage of the artist residency. The key thing is though, you don't get any special access, you can't do anything that no other visitors to the park could do. For example, just because you're artist in residence doesn't mean you get to use a drone, which are illegal. Or you don't get permits that are only accessible to certain types of user groups, like for example climbing permits that allow you access to certain areas, and you have to have a climbing permit to go there. You would have to go through whatever permitting process there is to do some special thing, just like anybody else. But what those other visitors don't get, which is what you get, is that opportunity to be housed in or near the park at no expense to you, for anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, which is pretty awesome. So, how do you find out about these opportunities? There are a lot of different places where you can get some information, but for the most part, the leading source of information, there is one particular page, and I'll show it to you. It's on the National Park Service website that has a map and it shows all artists and residence opportunities in all of the national park units. Now, some of them are managed directly by the National Park Service itself. However, others are managed by the National Parks Arts Foundation or also by associated nonprofits. All national parks have some nonprofit that is partnered with them. Like for Alaska, all of our national parks is Alaska Geographic. But most individual parks in the lower 48, there's an individual nonprofit association that is the nonprofit partner for that park. Now, another place where you can find out about opportunities as they arise is in call for entry. Some of the Park Service units, you apply directly through their website. They have a process you apply through. But some Park Service units, you have to apply through call for entry. So I'll talk a little bit about each of these. Let's start with this page right here. This is the landing page. It is the clearinghouse for all information about all Park Service artists and residence opportunities that there are in all of the United States. And when you scroll a little bit farther down on the page, you get this great interactive map. Now all you have to do, go to your mouse, hover over it, there will be a little pop-up box that tells about what that park unit is, and then it'll provide a link that you can click and go directly to the source of information that is for that national park unit. It might be that park's webpage, but it also might be the National Parks Arts Foundation website, or it might be an associated nonprofit website. They're all housed here. And this is where it'd be really fun to get on the internet and show you these, but I can tell you, for example, the two Hawaii ones are Haleakala and Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Both are maintained by the National Parks Arts Foundation. But in Alaska, we have quite a mix. There is one residency program that's actually called the Voices of the Wilderness Residency. It's a combination of National Park Service, National Wildlife Refuge, and Forest Service, and they're all specifically for wilderness areas. But one of them is the Western Arctic Parklands, which includes Kobuk Valley National Park and those Northwest Arctic units. But there's also the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and some wilderness areas in the southeast, in the Forest Service, in the Tongass. So there's really a lot of different mix of different types of residencies you can access through here. Now, call for entry. If you're an artist who wants to be looking for opportunities to exhibit or to get grants or participate in an artist in residence program, you should register with call for entry. There's a process where you create a login, you sign in, you create your profile, you build up a portfolio, you can load documents into it, and then you get a weekly email that says, here are this week's new artistic opportunities that are available. And there'll also be, like sometimes just, now this opportunity, boom, just this one thing. But usually it's kind of like a weekly summary of what are the new opportunities. Most of these and calls you have to have a small fee to apply. It really varies depending on who it is that's the artistic opportunity is with. But it's really probably one of the hidden gems of getting just a great clearinghouse, and you never ever know what you're going to find in here. Sometimes it is these National Park Service artist and residence programs that come up, but there are other opportunities to exhibit your work. I got about 60 images accepted for a National Parks exhibit that's going on in a gallery in Boulder, Colorado. So there are a lot of just weird things that show up. Most of the times it may not be germane to you, your particular interest in photography, but there's a lot of stuff and it's worth taking a look at. So the National Parks Arts Foundation, so similarly, you want to go there, sign in, create a profile, then you get their newsletters that tell you of upcoming artists in residence opportunities. So some of the ones that they host, in addition to the 2 Hawaii ones, they have a Death Valley one, and they have some in various like national historic sites and a few other national parks here and there. There aren't as many here, but the key thing about the National Parks Arts Foundation residencies is they pay stipends. Like the 2 Hawaii ones pay $2,000 and $3,000. They're month-long residencies. And the Hawaii Volcanoes one, for example, you're in like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, a short drive from the entrance to the park, and you get a $2,000 stipend. So, you know, that's a pretty good deal. You probably spent all of that on your rental car for a month in Hawaii, but it's something there to at least help offset the costs. And all of these, in addition to the stipends, do offer housing. I mean, pretty much universally, that is the one thing that all of the Park Service artists and residence programs offer is housing. Just not all housing is the same. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Associated nonprofits. So some of the bigger parks, it's their nonprofit partners that run their artist in residence program. Yellowstone, Yosemite, Everglades. Yellowstone, theirs is suspended, which is too bad, but and Yosemite's is by invitation only. So you've got to be some serious, well-known artist to even get a chance at doing a Yosemite residency. But Everglades is a weird one because, and I never could get an answer from them on this, they want you to submit a research project. I'm a photographer. What does that mean? What is a research project from a visual artist standpoint? And I never could get an answer from them on that. So what I do instead is I sign up to their newsletter, and then they give you information about the artists that have been selected, so that kind of helps you get a better sense of what it is they're looking for. All right, first things first, you've got to get organized. There are over 50 different opportunities available out there all over the place, so you need to figure out what to do. And start with, what parks do you want to go to? Start with that National Park Service Artist in Residence page I showed you, and just kind of scroll around. Just think about it. Think about what kind of photography you like to do. What haven't you done yet? Or what do you want to do more of? And think about where the places you want to go. Because they've got stuff from Acadia in Maine, down to Grand Canyon, up to Cascades, North Cascades National Park, Yellowstone, Badlands, Isle Royale in Michigan. So they're all over the place. Kind of think about where it is you want to go. For your first time you're applying, don't apply for a big one. Don't apply for a Yellowstone or a Zion or a Grand Canyon. Give us some more kind of backwater place that doesn't get a lot of visitation, and maybe start easier and kind of work your way up. You want to come up with a system, because these deadlines are all over the place in the calendar. And it's easy to confuse, how many artist residency opportunities are there, what time of year are they, what website do I go to in order to figure out where the information is. And become familiar with those details and come up with a system where you can keep track of them so you can apply for them. So for me, I created a spreadsheet. I identified the park units I'm interested in. I put a URL where I can find all the information, and then I put down other information that's relevant to the residency. When is the application deadline typically? How long is the residency? What time of year? How many residency opportunities are there? What are some particulars like lodging, stipends available? No family members allowed. That's important to know. So I gotta tell Michelle, sorry, sweetie, you'll have to meet up with me after the residency. You can't stay with me during the residency. And then what are other unique things? Like a couple of them are dark sky parks. So if you're into astrophotography, you might want to highlight that part and maybe go after one of those dark sky parks as a potential residency, because that's what they're all about. Next, organize your materials. If you are a photographer and if you ever apply for a grant, apply for an exhibit opportunity, a residency, if you have a website, These are things you want to have anyway. So come up with an artist statement, come up with a resume. You want to identify a portfolio that's kind of like your standby go-to portfolio for submitting for artist in residence opportunities. Because, you know, things happen. You might lose track of schedules, right? And then the next thing you know, you're like, oh crap, the deadline's tomorrow. And you don't want to create all this stuff. You want to have it in standby, ready to go. But lastly, this thing, of course, the project proposal, that's going to be very specific to the park. So that's one you really kind of can't create until you know what park you're applying to, and then also specifically what it is that they're looking for. So this is one that I have struggled with over time, and you know, there's really no written rule on here are the steps on what to include in your artist statement, like there's the resume. You know, you can find templates all over the place on the website on what you should have in your resume, generally speaking. But what to have in your artist statement? It's taken me a few tries, failed tries, but still some tries, trying to get grants through the Rasmussen Foundation through their individual artist program. And I've gone to a lot of their seminars on what to include in an artist statement. I'm like, okay, that's good information. But really, generally speaking, people want to get a sense of who you are as an artist, why do you create, why should people care about what you do? What is it about the audience that the audience should care, what matters to them about whatever it is, the art that is that you're trying to create? What's your story? How did you get started? What gets you going every day? What are the simple pleasures of being a photographer that keep you going and get you up early in the morning or keep you out late or hiking for miles or whatever it is that inspires you? But people want to get a sense of who you are and why you're doing it. Because they're looking for passion. And it's not just about passion in your imagery, that'll show, but they want to get a sense of who you are and why you create. So these are kind of all the things you want to include in an artist statement. And another thing that's important too about an artist statement is shop it out to some people who you trust, who are good editors, and tell them to be merciless. Tell them to go after it, edit it, come up with a lot of comments, be receptive to their comments, because you want to make sure that it makes sense, that people understand your motivation, that they get a sense of who you are, and that you don't have a bunch of disconnected sentences in there that just don't make any sense because it's coming out of your head, so of course it makes sense to you, but it needs to make sense to other people. So shop it around first, have other people look at it and help you edit it before you send it out there for an artist in residence application. Artist resume. So, the purpose of this is they're not looking for like longtime career artists, professional artists for these residency programs, but they are looking for someone who is trying to be out in the world as an artist. Not somebody who just goes and takes pictures and then sits at someone, looks at them on their computer, and that's all they ever do. That is not the kind of person they're looking when it comes to a photographer or any kind of artist for these artists in residence programs. So, you need to show you're out there. Have you had any kind of training? That really doesn't matter, but if you have, put it in there because it's shown that you've made an effort to learn. Have you ever had solo exhibits, group exhibits? If you've ever been accepted for Alaska Wild, that should be on your resume. That's a group exhibition. And what I also do too when I list Alaska Wild is I say where it's exhibited. Because the times, the years I've had it, I say it's been exhibited at the International Photography Hall of Fame, the Bell Museum at the University of Minnesota, and the Alaska Museum, and blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, ooh, cool, you were an exhibit that was included these places. What kind of honors or recognition have you received? Again, Alaska Wild, did you get best in category? Did you get best in show? Any of those kinds of things. You know, early in my career, I was putting, I had first place color for Rondi, and I had second place scenics in the Alaska Magazine annual photo competition. Whatever you have, even if you're just starting out as an artist, put it on there, because again, it's showing people that you're putting your work out there to the world, There are third parties who are evaluating your art, and they have found that it has merit and it's been recognized in some way. Has your photography been published? What magazines, what websites, what corporate calendars, anything like that. Now that's different from media. Media is, has the media reported on you as an artist? Have you been interviewed by Alaska Magazine? Were you on an NPR piece? Did the Anchorage Daily News do a write-up about you? This is where you include your media presence and where you have appeared and where you've been noted by the media. And then collections. So this is more so if there's a hotel in downtown Anchorage that has your stuff in all of its rooms, or if there's a law firm in Anchorage that bought 5 of your prints and now it's hanging in their main lobby. That's a collection. Somebody's purchased several of your pieces and now it's hanging at that place. So include that. And these are kind of the main things. There are other things that might also show up to include on your resume, but these are kind of the big ones. Create a portfolio. I think this is the hardest thing, aside from drafting the artist statement. And that is, okay, what's your best stuff? And does it show a sense of personal style? Does it show that you have a body of work? Don't have and I say start with 20 images. Now most artist in residence programs, they're gonna ask from anywhere from 6 to 10 images. But I like to have at least 20 on deck, so I can cater which 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 I include with the artist in residence application to whatever it is I'm saying in my project proposal, and why it is I'm seeking to go and have a residency opportunity in that park. But it needs to be 20 images that really show you have a body of work. It can't be 20 of the best chickadee photos in the world. I mean, they'd be amazing. Or 20 of the best Bohemian waxwings photos in the world. They may be fantastic, but they don't reflect a body of work. They don't reflect a sense of personal style. Now, this is the hardest part, I think, and that is recognizing what is your personal style. What is it I've been doing all these years, and do they say something about who I am and what I photograph and why I photograph it? But that's really what you're looking for. Sometimes they might share something in common. They don't have to be like all landscapes, but they might be really simple graphic compositions that don't have a lot of detail in them, but it really just depends. But see if there's something in common, and that would also probably be reflected in the sense of personal style and whether or not you have a body of work that can create kind of a cohesive 20-piece portfolio. Okay, so project proposal. The starting part is specifically what are they asking for in the application. When the process, the National Park Service, the cafe, the nonprofit, National Parks Arts Foundation, whomever it is, they're going to have very specific things they are asking you to address in the project proposal. Address each one of them. Don't just go off and do your own thing because, hey, I'm a good writer and I can just say what I'm going to do. No, they really want you to address the questions. I can say this as I've served on the panel selecting artists for 2 national parks. They want you to address the project proposal questions. Another thing that's hard to realize, but you're doing an artist in residence program is not about you, how it's going to benefit you. How is it going to benefit the park? That's another thing that artists often, because a lot of artistic opportunities, they want you to say, how is this going to benefit your career, you as an artist? So that's often kind of drilled into people, and that's naturally what they put in these. But no, the park is looking to see how is it having you, Carl Johnson, as an artist in residence in our park, going to benefit our park's mission. So, look at what the park's mission is. Look at their website. Even before you start your project proposal, look to their website. See what kind of issues are current for them. Are there concerns they have that need to be addressed? Are they affected by climate change or overvisitation, or do they have invasive species? All of the parks have awesome websites. They're full of fantastic detail. I'm a member of this Facebook group. It's called the National Park Service fan page. I don't know if anybody else is on this. But people post all of these questions on there, which 80% could be answered if people just looked at the park's websites, because they're full of great stuff. And people just don't do that. And when you're doing that, think about, okay, what kind of project would I do that would benefit me as an artist, but would give some benefit to the park? And you want to be able to be specific about it when you're telling them, this is how this will benefit your park. Tell them how it's going to benefit. How is it going to address any of their missions or concerns? Now, overall, you really need to be specific and use plain language. Another thing that artists, for some reason, I don't know why, but they start to think that they're poet laureates when they start to write these project proposals. And they use this flowery language, and it's all this, that, and very ethereal and theoretical, and it just makes no sense at all, and we don't care. Really, we don't. There have been a few times that I've been on the panel, and we're like, we ding the project proposals, like, A, we don't really get a sense of what their goal is, and B, we really can't figure out what they're saying, because they're just being really flowery with their language and all that. Be plain and be straight. That's the best way to go. Again, this is something you want to have somebody else look at and edit for you to make sure that it's written clearly, plainly, people understand it. You get a sense of what it is that you want to do, how's it going to benefit the park. Another thing that they will ask is, how will you use this experience after the residency? And specifically, they want to know how you're going to help to continue promoting the park's mission to the public after you're done with your residency. And this also ties in, they'll also ask you to specifically what you're going to do with your public presentations. So again, tie those in and see how they and it's probably a good idea to tie in your public presentations with the theme of your project proposal as well. Because again, it's showing that you're being thoughtful about, being very comprehensive and thoughtful about what it is that you want to do as part of your residency and how it's going to benefit the park. Okay, other tips. I already mentioned one of them. Look at the websites. Know about the National Park System. Know that there are multiple different types of national park units. There's parks, memorials, national scenic byways, and waterways, and historic sites, and all kinds of stuff. Understand how the Park Service generally works, what's its mission, what are some of the concerns that are generally hitting parks right now, and I've mentioned 3 of them already: climate change, visitation, invasive species. You'll find in a lot of parks those 3 issues are there. But the more you understand the National Park Service, the more you can kind of speak the language and understand what it is that they're looking for. I already mentioned a couple of these. Get out there as an artist. Work on your sense of personal style so that you have something that you can contribute to your portfolio that is coherent, that makes sense. Be persistent. I was lucky. I got my first, I was accepted for my first, second, and third park artist residencies I applied to. I don't know what I did right. One of them was pure luck. I'll explain that I gave them exactly what they were looking for at that moment in time. But I've had several failures since then. And one that I applied to twice, and after my first time, I asked for feedback, I got feedback, and I had a successful second application. But you have to be persistent. It's like anything else you're trying to do as an artist to get yourself out there, whether it's get published or get a grant or anything else. You gotta just keep hammering it. See if you can learn information about how you can improve your application next time. They're not always forthcoming about that. In fact, I was really disturbed to learn, so the National Parks Arts Foundation, the first couple of times I applied to them, website and find out what the status is of your application. And the reason for that is, they got threatening, violent, abusive behavior from people when they got their "you're rejected" letters, and people would then get really angry and call them up and bitch and complain. And even one of them was like a professor at a college complaining about how none of his students got accepted or something like that. And it's just like, you know, hopefully you put them on the blacklist and you'll reject their applications from here on out. But I did find out a little bit more about their process and all that, but still, most of them will give you a notification. Not all will give you an opportunity to understand why you didn't get accepted, but some will. But you have to be persistent. That's really a universal theme. Work at it, work at it, work at it. Okay, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my residency experiences, and because this is a photography group, I'd also share some pretty pictures from those residency experiences. My very first one was with Gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve. Yay, right here in Alaska. Now, they offer a 2-week residency. Now, I said earlier that lodging varies from place to place. The lodging for this residency is a tent, because you go on a backcountry patrol with a park ranger. Yeah. And they do one residency a year. Now, I don't know what their status is. It's been a while since I've looked at where they're at. But they did experiment with a winter residency, which I helped set up the base camp for that, which is really awesome. But that's kind of the basics of it. You get yourself up to Coldfoot, and then from there they fly you to Bettles. That's where the main park headquarters is for Gates of the Arctic. And then they equip you up with outdoor gear, you have an overnight, and then you're off on a plane the next morning, you go fly off. And you get to pick what you want to do for your residency. Do you want a base camp, float, backpack, wherever in the park you want to go? It's entirely up to you. You're the one who sets the backcountry patrol for this residency. Now, again, they only ask for one donated piece of art. But I was feeling a little hungry. This is my first artist in residency application. So I said, I'll donate you 50 high-res digital files of images I captured during the residency, plus I'll give you 3 framed prints that you can use to represent different aspects of the park. Well, it turns out they had recently lost their entire digital photo collection in a fire. And so I just happened to give them exactly what they needed, which was more photos that they could use for, interpretive exhibits and, newsletters and their website and whatnot. Just complete luck. And as it turned out, I was also the first photographer accepted for a residency in the park. But again, serendipity. If it had been 2 years earlier when they still had all their photos, maybe they wouldn't have accepted me because they didn't really desperately need more photos for their collection. But now one of the things I mentioned in the previous slide, kind of like other tips, is to leverage that park residency. So this developed an ongoing relationship between me and the National Park Service in Alaska. A little bit about the residency. I already mentioned a few of these things, but I really wanted to kind of emphasize the caribou migration through one particular part of the park. So that's how I did some research, and that's how I selected where we would do. We did kind of a hybrid of a base camp and a float. So we base camped for a week at the headwaters of the Alatna River, and then we got picked up and dropped off right across from what is the typical drop-off point for people to go backpack in the Arrogach Peaks area, and then floated floated there on the Alatna River for another week down to what's called the Malamute Fork, which is a common pickup site for float planes because the Malamute Fork comes in, and north of that, the waters are kind of murky. You really can't see well, which is bad for landing with a float plane on a river. But at that point, the water is clear because the Malamute Fork comes in. It's got nice, clear water. But this developed a relationship with the Park Service. My public presentation for the park was at that Public Lands Information Center in Fairbanks. And then the Park Service started contacting me. Hey, we can spend this amount of dollars before putting out to competitive bid. We need some photos of this area. Would you like to go do some aerial photography? Oh yeah, and we're going to be setting up the winter base camp for our winter artist in residence right there on the North Fork of the Kayakuk, right in view of the Gates of the Arctic, Mount Boreal and Frigid Crag in March. Would you like to come out and take some pictures? And we'll pay you. Yes, and it was during that trip in the wintertime that I took this photo, which is one of my most award-winning photos. But had I not been in the middle of nowhere with a park ranger and his 9-dog team mushing to break trail for their artist in residence, I wouldn't have taken that photo, and I wouldn't have had this photo exhibited in all the places it's exhibited over the years. And then I subsequently served 3 times on the artist in residence selection panel for Gates of the Arctic, which kind of gave me kind of more of an opportunity to kind of see how that process works. So favorite moment. This photo is not from Gates of the Arctic, because my favorite moment, I couldn't take a photo. But it involved a wolf, a light-colored wolf. So when we got dropped off, we floated down to our first campsite on a gravel bar on the Alatna River, and we decided to immediately just do a 2-night layover. So it's the next morning, and I'm at there's this little side tributary creek that's coming in right by our gravel bar, and I'm there crouched like right in this little tributary, and I'm pumping water, and I'm just kind of like da-da-da-da, I'm pumping water, and I look to my left, and there's a wolf standing maybe 15 feet away from me, just standing there on the gravel bar on the left, in one of the channels there, and just looking at me, watching me, pretty much like this guy is here. This was in Katmai, and he's just watching me for a while, and I just start talking to him. Because what else am I going to do? My camera's 100 feet away in our little kitchen tarp area we had set up. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe if I just kind of move furtively, I can go over and get my camera and come back and take pictures. But as soon as I turned my back to him and I turned back around again, he was gone. Didn't see him, didn't know where he went. And this is kind of one of those learning moments for being a photographer, because the instant reaction is to be just really pissed with myself for not having my camera right there so I could take a picture. And then to have to okay, chill out. You got to see a wolf like 15 feet away. And the reason for that is because you're here in the wilderness. Yes, you're here in the wilderness to take pictures, but you wouldn't have seen that if you weren't here. And let it go, it's okay. You didn't get the picture of the wolf. Hopefully you'll get to take some wolf pictures later on in life. So it's one of those lessons though you have to learn and repeat, is that sometimes the fact that you're out photographing in the wilderness just means you get to be out in the wilderness and get to see cool stuff. All right, so I just thought I'd share some sample photos from the residency. I went up there in mid-August, and tundra was changing colors, a lot of kind of cloudy weather, not a lot of clear days. Unfortunately, this is before I really got into aurora chasing, so that didn't even come into my head at all about the timing of when to do the residency. But, even at that time, this was about 4 in the morning, and I got up, and I really, 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 really wanted a line of bull caribou to just show up right here. And I waited, and they just didn't show up, but still. So this is looking north. I hiked a little bit north of our campsite, and to the left is the headwaters of the Naigu River. To the right is the headwaters of the Killick River, which flows north towards the coastal plain. And then off to my right is the headwaters of the Alatna River flowing south. And I just love what was going on with the lines, the contours, the colors of this shot. So we hiked up on some of these high plateaus, way above our campsite, of course, because it's a caribou area, lots of caribou antlers all over the place. This is the one that was the most intact. This is one of our rare, really sunny, nice days on the Alatna River after we've started our float. One of the things I really dug about this area was the geology was just really cool. A lot of times, it kind of reminded me of some parts of Montana. It just looked really different compared to everything I had seen in Alaska. And this was my first time in the Arctic. In fact, my first time going to Fairbanks at all was to drive up to Coldfoot for this residency. So this opened my eyes up entirely to what the Arctic landscape could look like, and it's been downhill ever since. I'm just totally a sucker for the Arctic now. Of course, some cool wildlife opportunities, in addition to the wolf that I didn't photograph, this lovely grouse, and it just kind of really didn't, you couldn't beat getting up in the morning and rolling out of your tent and seeing stuff like this, like literally a few feet away from your tent. Okay, my next residency, so Gates of the Arctic was 2007. So my next one I applied for was Badlands National Park in South Dakota. Month-long residency. You get an efficiency apartment and staff housing so it's right in the park is where the housing is. Of course, you do a presentation, and I do have 2 annual residencies. There's one in the spring and the fall. I had a spring residency. So my proposal, when I talked about my project proposal, I talked a bit about reconnecting with my youth, because I grew up in the Black Hills. And I went out to the Badlands a lot as a kid, and I really kind of pushed that connection, and wanted to re-envision the landscape now with an artist's eyes, and now that I was a photographer and I wasn't when I was a kid. And one of the things the 2 main themes I proposed was, one, I really wanted to encourage getting off the road system and exploring the park. Because Badlands is like most national parks, where like 90 to 95% of the visitors just don't leave the road system. And most of them, their experience with a national park is pulling up to the pullout, grabbing their camera, taking a picture, and moving on to the next one. That's it. So I really wanted to emphasize experiencing the park more. But then I also wanted to share the experience of my exploring the park with park visitors. So I proposed I would do a daily blog, and I would blog on every single one of my outings, tell what I did, what my thought process was, what my creative process was, what wildlife experiences I had, all that kind of stuff. And they dug it. So they accepted me. I took a spring residency. And so this is when I started to think about, okay, well, what can I do to fund some of this? So I applied for and got, it wasn't much, but still, it was a $500 Alaska State Council on the Art project grant. I also I reached out ahead to some prominent local businesses in Rapid City and pushed again the whole homeboy coming back angle, and sought some business investment in my residency, and I got one business to give me some money to help pay for renting a car. I also, it wasn't very expensive, but I hired a South Dakota-based PR firm to kind of reach out and message about my residency. And they worked in partner with a local PR person I've worked with, and that got me an interview on a local Fox affiliate that was kind of later in my residency, and when I got out and talked about my creative process and about my residency. So I really, and I also connected with South Dakota Magazine. But again, I was reaching out, trying to, like I was saying, leverage the residency. Use the residency as an excuse to reach out to people and make connections. And in this case, South Dakota Magazine carried on their website my daily blog posts. So that gave them content that they could put on their website, but then also drove people to my website, which was great. And then that eventually led to a relationship where I had two different pieces published with South Dakota Magazine. One flowing from the residency and one flowing from Winter Trip I did there separately. So I did a couple other things too. This is my first time exploring with time-lapse, which was fun. Like every one of these residencies, I wish I could go back and do them again with the knowledge I have now, and of course the gear I have now, but that's the way it goes as a photographer. But one of the things I did something a little different for this. I wanted to have the park visitors select the piece of art that I would donate to the park. So I printed a little booklet with one of those online book printing companies you can do, and I sent it to Badlands National Park after my residency, along with voting sheets, and said, please put this out with a sign, ask visitors to vote on which photo I should donate to the park, and that's how I did it. And again, that led to more interaction with the park after the residency.
Is that the photo, Carl?
Yeah, and that's it right there. That's the one. That's the one everybody picked. Yeah. This is in the, it's called the Kanata Basin, kind of in the heart of Badlands. So favorite moments. I did a 3-day solo. Badlands has a wilderness area, federally designated wilderness area called the Sage Creek Wilderness. So again, part of the mission of getting away from the park road, I decided to do a solo 3-day backpack through the Sage Creek Wilderness. which was a little daunting because no known water source anywhere in that area. So I started out hiking with 5 quarts of water, in addition to all of the other gear, the camera gear, the tent, food, all that stuff. I did eventually find a water source. It was a watering hole that was surrounded with bighorn sheep, bison, and pronghorn tracks, and mule deer tracks. So I both treated and boiled the water before I drank it. That much animal activity. But I'm camped out, this is my second night, and I've kind of found this cool plateau to set up on. It's got this great view looking all around. And I set my tent up there, and all of a sudden off in the distance I see all these little brown specks. And there comes this big herd. It's all female and calf, bison, all just kind of making their way across. And I'm just sitting up there with this front row seat on this mesa. I haven't seen another human in 2 days. And I'm surrounded by bison. And it was pretty awesome. So it's a completely free range herd of American bison. One of the many cool things about Badlands National Park. So I got there in the spring. They had a recent snowfall, so there was snow on the ground, which was kind of cool. And everything was still brown as far as the grasses grow and everything, but the snow as it melted, it would leave the ground and the clay formations moist, which helped to bring out the colors really nicely. It was also, thunderstorm season already, and living in Anchorage, by this time, this was 2009, so I've been in Anchorage for 10 years. I'd seen maybe 1 or 2 thunderstorms in 10 years, and I really missed them growing up on the plains. So I spent a lot of time, as much as I could, photographing lightning. Picture on the left was during my Sage Creek Wilderness backpack. This was on the mesa where I was camped out. Now, things are starting to green up in the right photo. There's it's a national grasslands that's kind of tucked in between the north unit and the south unit of Badlands. And if you go back and forth, you drive through this grasslands area, and there's often bison grazing around there. This is on the south unit. This is called Sheep Mountain Table. It's one of the under-visited areas of the park, but probably some of the best scenery. I like that. I always like that combination. Fewer visitors, best scenery, always great. A lot of great wildlife opportunities. Growing up as a kid, I wasn't really paying attention to that so much. So to go back as a photographer and to see all of these, there was coyotes and pronghorn and prairie dogs, which of course, growing up with prairie dogs, when I first moved to Alaska and I saw my first Arctic ground squirrel, I was like, what the hell are prairie dogs doing in Alaska? They look very, very similar. But bison, just a lot of great stuff. Meadowlark in this photo taken off. Getting to hear red-winged blackbirds sing again, which I hadn't heard since growing up in South Dakota. And then my last residency that I've done thus far is Rocky Mountain National Park. So it's a 2-week residency. They have 5 residencies a year. Your lodging is this gorgeous historic log cabin that's right in the heart of the park. It's some famous writer who lived there when he was writing his stuff. And it's fully plumbed and all that and has power, so it's not like you're a UAF student living in a dry cabin in Fairbanks for 4 years. No, it was a really nice cabin. And I did 2 presentations as part of that residency. So you'll often see that it's pretty common that it's usually at least 2 presentations. Gates of the Arctic is only 1, just because they really can't do a presentation in the park. So I decided I would take the same approach that was successful with Badlands, because I applied the same year for Badlands as I did for Rocky Mountain. I just replicated the project proposal and submitted it to Rocky Mountain National Park, except taking out the growing up there part, because that didn't apply. But getting away from the popular areas, blogging about the experience, that was the same proposal I did for Badlands. And because one of the things I looked at when I was studying the park website is that they had an extensive trail system. But I also could see where there were certain trailheads that got a lot of congestion, because they would have notices about how that parking lot was closed and things like that, because they just fill up that early. So again, I thought that would be an approach that would work, and it did. So it was a summer residency. Now, since I'm a now a coastal living boy from Alaska, and I recall I've been in high altitude areas since living in Alaska, like going to the Big Island, going up to the Mauna Kea Observatory, and not being able to breathe, walking 10 feet at 14,000 feet. I decided to go a few days early and get acclimated, so I spent some time playing around in Great Sand Dunes National Park, which is the photo on the left, and did a lot of hiking. It was great because even though I knew that the parking lots would be all congested by the time I got back, getting out before basically pre-dawn, with a headlamp and heading out, the only people I would run into were climbers. And that kind of leads to something, because some of these parks will accept somebody who's already been a resident to come back and do a second residency. So it kind of gave me an idea to kind of document the climbing culture of Rocky Mountain National Park. Would be kind of a cool residency, so I might do that someday. But I did do a couple of things. Again, I connected with local media. I reached out to local artists. In fact, the photographer whose gallery I visited, who's right there at Estes Park, I had learned about him through social media. So I thought, I'm going to go see his gallery, and we've stayed in touch, and he's going to be our December or our November presentation. So, but anyway, you never know how these things are going to connect. You just got to keep maximizing the opportunity, whatever that opportunity is with a residency. The cool thing I did was I took a smaller, like a day pack with a little bit of food and a bivvy and my camera gear, and I decided to do an overnight at Chasm Lake, which you're sitting at the base of the north side of Long's Peak, which is one of the 14ers in Rocky Mountain National Park, very popular climbing peak. And I decided to set up 2 cameras, 2 tripods, one doing an all sunset through night to sunrise time lapse, and then with a digital camera, and then I took my Hasselblad film camera and set it up to just do a 5-hour Star Trail shot. Just set it up and get that going. And that is what led me to my favorite moment, was that setup. So, unfortunately, this is one of those times when I really wish I was a better photography then, like I am now, because the whole all-night time-lapse thing just didn't work. It didn't work, the settings were wrong. But I was getting up periodically to manually adjust the settings as the night got darker and as it got lighter in the morning. And one of those times I was adjusting the camera, I made the adjustment, I turned off my headlamp, and I was just standing there for a moment looking up at the starry sky because it was black, it was perfectly clear, it was just gorgeous. And all of a sudden things started hitting me. Just hitting my body, hitting my head. I'm like, what the hell? And it was moths. They just came out of nowhere, and there was thousands of them flying around. And then I heard this, the sound of leathery wings going around. It was a bat feeding frenzy on all these moths that had come out. And I didn't turn on my headlamp. I was almost afraid to. If you've ever seen Pitch Black, that was going through my head right there, that movie, and turning on the headlamp and knowing what I would see. But the next morning when I got up, there was a stuff all over the surface of the lake, and I looked at it closely, and it was moth wings. So the bats had taken the moth in its mouth, eaten the body, spit out the wings, and there were these little moth wings all over the surface of the lake. Totally bizarre. And again, one of those things, there's no way I could have photographed it, and there's no way I would have had that experience had I not been out there. All right, so just a few, again, elk, very common wildlife opportunity in Rocky Mountain National Park, bighorn sheep. Actually found some moose on the west side of the park, and I was like, oh, moose, how quaint. They're so cute and small compared to ours. This is Long's Peak on the right, so this is kind of the backside of where I was at when I was at Chasm Lake. And again, thunderstorms. I was there in mid-July for 2 weeks, so some great thunderstorm opportunities to photograph. The one on the right was just pure luck. I was just taking pictures, and boom, it happened to show up. I tried a lightning trigger, but the times I was shooting thunderstorms, I think it was too bright. Still, there was too much sunlight yet for the lightning trigger to be effective. And the picture on the left was one of those pre-dawn hikes. Just layers and layers of mountains, so I could appreciate that. Little double exposure on the right. First exposure in focus, second exposure out of focus. There's Chasm Lake on the left. And you can see all these little specks here in the water. Those are the moth wings littering the lake surface. All right, so I've been accepted for an artist residency in Shenandoah National Park this year. It was my second time applying, and I did get some feedback after the first one, and I took it. So this is not Shenandoah, but I will probably fly into DC in order to drive to Shenandoah National Park. I've never been to Shenandoah, so I don't know if that helped or not, but they have 5 residencies, 2-week period, and they range from May to October. So I asked for, my priority was the one that's end of October to first week of November, because I was really hoping to get some of those East Coast, fall colors, and that's what I got for my residency. You stay at, there's like a tourist lodge, like an actual lodge in the park, and that's where you stay. No guests allowed, so I told Michelle she can come down and visit me after the residency. And again, 2 presentations, 1 a week. So, again, I was studying the park's website, and I noticed that they had, for the first time, instituted a day hike permit for this one particularly popular area. And I also looked at park visitation statistics, and I mentioned them in my project proposal. I said, as Shenandoah gets 1.5 million visitors a year, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, they like it when you have taken the time to look at the park's website, understand what their issues are, the resources. And I wanted to really emphasize that. It's like, we need to help people realize that there are other beautiful places to hike in the park other than this spot, which you now have to institute this day hike permit for. And I said, I'd love to work with staff and help to kind of design a plan to come up with highlighting those areas. And I was also very specific too on how I would, what kind of presentations I would do. They really were intrigued by the presentation ideas. And also too, this residency is different in that finalist is an interview process. So this is the only park I've ever applied to that had an interview process as part of the selection. So that was kind of cool, because it helps you kind of get after the first time, get a little bit of a sense of what it is they're looking for. I will look forward to sharing I will probably, be blogging and doing all that other kind of stuff that I love to do, and telling stories about the park, and we'll see, what kind of stuff I come up with it. But it's going to be fun and exciting, and that's kind of the gist of my presentation. So I know there's a lot there, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Oh, come on.
You answered all the questions.
Yes, sir.
I'll ask a question. Thanks. That was a really great presentation.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Oh yeah. Really appreciated the material and the photos. Curious. Your first residency was in 2007, and I was just interested. What were you shooting with back then?
Yeah, another reason why I'd love to go back and do some of these things. I was shooting both film and digital at the time, because I hadn't fully transitioned out of film. So I had my Nikon F100 to shoot 35, and then my digital was a Nikon D200. So.
And the photos that you shared with us in here for
Yeah.
that residency, were those both, or were those digital photos?
There were some that were film, but most of them were digital. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, I've now kind of worked up a list of, kind of go-to things that things I wish I could have done at other residencies that I now will make sure to do at these residencies. Yeah. Alan.
The Badlands, you mentioned the North Unit and South Unit. Are they both in South Dakota, or is the North Unit?
Yeah, they're just a short drive away from each other. The interesting thing, the South Unit is co-managed by the Oglala Sioux tribe, because it's right there at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And so if you want to go a little bit farther south, you can even get to the Wounded Knee massacre site and visit that too. But there's another entire unit called the Stronghold Unit that is hard to get to. It's actually surrounded by private land, so you have to negotiate with private landholders to get access. And if I were to go back and do another residency at Badlands, I'd want to go work on that unit.
In the Alaska parks, you've got bears to worry about. What was some of the wildlife you needed to be concerned
Bison.
about down there? Bison.
Bison. I'm much more afraid of bison than I am of bears. Bears give up all kinds of signals that they're pissed at you. Bison, they just stand and stare at you, and the next thing you know, they're charging at full speed. There's no in between cold and hot. They just, boom, they're going. So one of the times I was hiking through the Sage Creek area, and I'm hiking along, and I turn this corner, and there's this big bull just standing there, just staring right at me. And I actually, as I was hiking with my camera around my chest, I did take a picture of him before backing off and getting around the corner. Yeah, bison, that would be the number one thing.
Do you
for
carry
parents.
bison spray with you?
No, I think that would just really piss him off. I really do, yeah.
I'm curious, what's your goat? What would be your greatest of all time? What would your which park are you most hoping to get a residency? Is there one in particular?
Oh, that'd be tough. I really want to do another wilderness Alaska residency. I was going to mention this. So the Voices of the Wilderness, I did mention them, yeah. Voices of the Wilderness, they do wilderness residencies among Forest Service, Refuge, and Park Service. So ideal would be a Western Arctic Parklands residency. I really would love to do that. I mean, yeah, it'd be cool to do one in Yellowstone or Zion. I mean, that would be awesome, but there are so many photographers going to those places, and it's just so much more of a clean slate creatively to go to some place like Kobuk Valley National Park than it is Yellowstone. Yeah, and I'm not going to deal with crowds at Kobuk Valley. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the presentations and from your point of view, maybe from the audience point of view, like were they big audiences, small audiences? Did the place give you criteria of what you had to cover, like amount of time, any of that kind of stuff?
I mean, there's a certain time. I mean, like typically within an hour, get your presentation done. That's the gold standard is an hour. Both of them were very well, both public, there's the one in Fairbanks. So all the ones that I did that had the public presentations were all well attended. They were in kind of theater sort of auditorium rooms. They were appropriate for doing presentations. They provide all the AV support you need. Basically, all you tell them what you need for the presentation, and you tell them what the presentation is going to be, and then they let the park visitors know when it is, what it is, who you are. They take care of all the messaging and all of that. There's no criteria other than the obviously common sense. Don't share your moose porn photos probably because he needs to be child appropriate. But I haven't had a moose porn photo yet. I've been so close so many times. Oh no, she's not interested. No. Anyway, so but yeah, it's really again you set the stage of what you want to present about and how you want to do it. And again, when I have two presentations, I like to do one indoor and one outdoor. I like to do the hands-on, get people out experiencing, doing the things you do to create photography.
So you're talking more about your craft at that point versus like you had your idea of a blog or something you're not.
Yeah, so like the two presentations I'll do at Shenandoah, one will be teaching people how to see, how to visualize, get out, how to notice things, how to notice details, how to translate what you see and what you're interested in into a good photo. So it's kind of more conceptual, but it's hands-on conceptual. My indoor presentation will be about inspiration, about what's inspired me as an artist and how I've explored different topics and how I keep being inspired from day to day. So it's something uplifting and people can enjoy and not too technical. Because that if I'm going to do anything technical, it would be on the hands-on part, not in the presentation. I want it to be accessible to a broad audience so they can enjoy pretty pictures and hear somebody talk about their photography. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a feel for how many people are applying for these now?
Well, I can tell you how many applied. The Shenandoah one, they told me, as I asked them, because I wanted to be able to say, hey, I'm going to write this up on my website, I need to know. 350 applicants for 5 residencies for Shenandoah. So I can't even imagine what it's like in even some of the bigger parks, like Great Smoky Mountain National Park has a residency program. They have 9 million visitors that go there. It's the most visited park in the United States. 9 million visitors. So I can't even imagine how many people would be trying to go there for a residency.
Did your previous experience with the National Park Registry, did that help you get approved for the Shenandoah one?
With the National Park Registry, what do you mean?
Well, no, your previous artists and residencies.
I mean, they did and they didn't. I mean, I've had 5, 6 residencies I've been rejected for since Rocky Mountain, including the first time I applied to Shenandoah. So it's just, yeah, I think you just have to figure out how to fine tune it for that specific park and try to get more what it is that they're looking for. And that's why you don't need to be persistent, try different residencies, but if you're rejected by one, apply for it again and again. You know, like I've just, a few weeks ago, submitted my second time applying for an artist residency with Death Valley National Park through the National Parks Arts Foundation does that one too. So we'll see if I'm closer to what they're looking for. So it helps and it doesn't. You know, you kind of get an idea of what they're looking for, but like with any jury selection process, it's going to be different every time there's a different jury, which is every time. There's always one through thread. There's a park staff person who's in charge of the program, who is always a part of the selection process. But then who else is involved is going to be changing from year to year. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you all. Again, great to see everybody here in person.
Alan, did you say there's no, Alan?
Ellen.
Did you say that there are no number slides tonight?
You what now?
Do we have number slides?